Welcome to the Strathroy and District Historical Society's online February Show and Tell meeting. Every February, we invite members to share artifacts, stories, and local history in a show and tell discussion session. Every year, we learn something new. This year was no different. This meeting took place on February 16th, 2021 via Zoom. For more information about the Historical Society and what we do, please visit our Facebook page at facebook.com/Strathroy Historical Society or visit our website at sdhsociety.weebly.com.
It's Doug and Sharon Statham. We're going to introduce you to our old 37 Fargo pickup truck and show you what sort of equipment's bolted on the back of it. We start off with this little generator which we found in an outbuilding on a farm just outside Strathroy several years ago. It didn't run and it didn't generate electricity when we got it. However, we worked on it and now it does. The nameplate says it was built by Betger Industries Limited in Stratford. I've not been able to find any source of information about Betger Industries in Stratford, so maybe someone else can jump in there and find some of that. Behind that is a pump built by the F.E. Myers Company in Ohio. These were used to supply water, commonly used to supply water for the water tanks towed by steam engines, which traveled around in the fall to do thrashings at various farms. And this pump works. Built about 1912. I've refurbished it pretty well. Then we move over to here. In the center of the truck is a hand winch built by London Machinery in the 1950s. It's a 10,000 pound winch, which we'll never have to do any work of that nature on this little old truck, but it's a fun thing to play with. Over here we have a Monarch Machinery gas engine water pump. Monarch is out of Winnipeg, Manitoba, and these were often sold to tobacco farmers in the area. And this old girl, it runs pretty good, it pumps water okay now. Move up here a little further. This piece of equipment is used to power the winch. It's a hand winch, but has adapters so it can be powered. It's a transmission out of a 1926 Chrysler car. I managed to get the transmission for $2 at an auction sale, so it was too good a deal to not buy. And I've now found something I might be able to use it for, although we'll never have to really do any work. That gives you a quick tour of the back of the truck and what's on there. The truck itself is a story for another day. It's a Strathroy truck, spent its whole working life here, and sometime we maybe take a tour of the rest of it. Well, Sharon, we'll go inside. It's -10 outside, so maybe it's time to wind up and go in.
I always knew that my grandpa, my dad's dad, had been in the war, in the First World War, but I didn't know much more than that. My Aunt Audrey, my dad's sister, passed away last April, and she had never married, so she and my grandma built a house in 1963, so everything from my grandparents' house was transferred there, and then she lived in the house for the rest of her life, and she was in her early 90s, so there was 2 generations worth of stuff to go through, and we found a lot of really cool things. But what I have today, to me, I just thought this was hilarious. So I found my grandpa's war stuff. Like, we thought we had a uniform, but it turned out there's no uniform. But there's all kinds of things. There's pins. There's his canteen. There's bandages. All kinds of interesting things. But this thing that I'm going to show you was in a bag by itself, and there was a note that was written by my Aunt Audrey, and it said, "This is the last biscuit Dad carried in his canteen during the First World War, 1918." And I went, what? Anyway, I have a biscuit. So this biscuit is from 1918, First World War, still in one piece. And I don't know, I just thought, like, if it's lasting 100 years, I don't think I probably would have wanted to have eaten it at the time, but I just thought that was really weird. So that's my first thing. Yeah, and I should just mention a bit about my grandpa. So I did do some research. I haven't really had a lot of time to go through it yet, but I found out that he left for England on February the 4th, 1918, and then he was sent to France, where he spent the rest of his time there. He was sent there in August of 1918, and he was with the 43rd Battalion, which again, I have not researched that, so I don't really know any more than that about that. My second thing is actually from my mom's house. She passed away just this past January, but I've actually had this for a while because I've always loved these things, and basically I kind of just stole it from her house. But I don't know if anybody remembers Renee and Claudine Costas that came to town in the late 60s. I think it was 1967. She was a ballerina. She was from France. Well, they're both from France. She was a ballerina, and he had been an actor, but he kind of got into dance while they were here. And they said the reason they moved to Strathroy was to get out of the whole Toronto thing, and they were living in a trailer, which I think there was more to the story, but that's the story they gave. So apparently she danced in Europe, Canada, and South America. And what they did while they were here is they made paper mache figures, dance pose. I don't know if you can see it, the whole thing. So I have 3 of these dance pose figurines, I guess, but they're made out of paper mache. So there's this one. I have 2 other ones that are dance poses. And from my Aunt Audrey, she had one made for her of a cat, because my Aunt Audrey was a cat freak. So I have that one as well now too. So they got a contract with the Eaton Company, and they sold these dance figurines in Eaton's, like in Toronto, Winnipeg, all across Canada. And then, you know, they just sort of disappeared one day. And I actually did a post on the Costas on the Facebook page, and I managed to find their daughter, because when I was a girl, I wanted to be a ballerina, and I was just mesmerized by this woman because she was a real ballerina. But she had a daughter that was pretty much the same age as me, and I actually did find her on Facebook. She's out in Vancouver, so she was really excited that we did the story because both her parents had passed away. So does anybody else remember the Costases? No? Okay, I guess they were just big in my family. Anyway, I've always loved these things, so I'm really glad that I kind of took them from my mother's house. So that's it for me.
What I have done over, among other things, I've collected some antique firearms over the years, not many. I have some from the American Civil War and some from Canada, late 18th century. That picture that I'm showing you is basically, it's called a Martini Medford, and we don't have to worry about that. What I wanted you to think about as well, do you remember a few years ago the Canadian government bought some used British submarines? It turned out to be a disaster. In fact, one sailor was killed when they were sailing on one and a fire started, and a Canadian sailor was actually killed in the fire. They were not a very good deal, but they were cheap. The Canadian government said, well, we can get some decent used submarines. They were not nuclear subs, they were really old diesel subs, but we can get them cheap. Well, they turned out not to be cheap. I think they're still trying to fix them, and this is 20 years later. But anyway, why this, I'm getting around to this. Up until, for about 900 years, all firearms used a black powder as a propellant to send the bullets, cannonballs, whatever, out, whatever. But now there was 2 things wrong with black powder. It was the Chinese invented it in the 11th century, and it was used forever. 2 things wrong: it created a lot of white smoke, and it was also had a low muzzle velocity, and all the smoke would envelop the battlefield. And the next thing you would know, you couldn't see your opponent, couldn't see anybody if there was no breeze, because it didn't blow the smoke away. I'm talking military, of course. But so that was one thing. And it also had what they call a low muzzle velocity, which is about 12 to 1500 feet per second, which seems pretty slow. But is not very fast not according to modern technology. So what they did to compensate for the low muzzle velocity was they made a big bullet. So by the late 1880s, it was about a 45 caliber for military firearms, which means it was 0.45 inches diameter, the bullet, which is a pretty big heavy lead ball. And you're familiar with if you've watched all the Western movies, John Wayne used a Colt 45 that had a 45 caliber bullet. You needed weight to knock your opponent down because it wasn't going very fast out of the end of the rifle. That's what the muzzle velocity is called. So you have smoke, low muzzle velocity. Then in the 1880s, a Frenchman designed smokeless powder. And then a British chemist developed what they call cordite at the time, which gave a much higher muzzle velocity. So it was much more powerful than the old black powder. So immediately all the military started converting to this new powder, except the Canadian government, which was still stuck with obsolete weapons for their militia and their permanent force and whatnot. So they hemmed and hawed. In the meantime, at the same time, for about 20 or 30 years, the military of all countries believed in the single shot firearm. So fire one round, reload, fire another round. Now, there are lots of repeating rifles that civilians could buy. Think of the Western movies, John Wayne using his Winchester repeating rifle. Any civilians could buy repeating weapons, but not the military. General Custer might have thought about that before he went down at the Bighorn when he and his troops were using the single-shot firearms, and the Cheyenne and the Sioux and all the others were using all the repeating weapons and blasting them to oblivion. So at any rate, they decided in the 1890s that they would go to repeating weapons, bolt action. Now, I know I'm going a roundabout way to get to the story here, but anyway, so the British had all these stores of single-shot, lower caliber weapons. The British adopted what was called the 303. So instead of 0.45 inches, it was 0.303 inches in diameter of the bullet, because it could go a lot faster, farther, and hit with the same thing if you were shooting at an enemy. So the higher velocity was meant for smaller weapons. Well, the Canadian government found out that, hey, now that the British are converting to repeating weapons, they got a lot of these single-shot 303s, and we can get them cheap. And so they did. And they ordered a whole bunch of them, about I think total in 11,000, but 7,000 of the long rifles. And they decided to send them to, the Canadian government ordered 1,000 to come to Canada. They did send 1,000. Now, what the British forgot to tell the Canadians is when they had refurbished their rifles for the smaller caliber, they took the barrel stock, which is a solid piece of iron, and instead of boring it out 0.45 inches, they only bored it out to 0.303. So it made the barrel a lot heavier, 1/3 heavier as it goes, and put it on the rifles. So these are the rifles they sent to Canada. And the Canadian government said, okay, we'll test them out. Plus, they ordered a very long bayonet, heavy bayonet to fit on the end of it. Well, you got to remember your soldiers of the 1890s and so on were not 6'2", 200-pounders. They were lucky to be 5, 6, 7, 8, and maybe 135 pounds soaking wet. Now you give them a rifle that weighs almost 9 pounds, and it's now increased to over 10 pounds, almost 11. They proved to be totally unsuitable for use in Canada. So fortunately, the Canadian government canceled the rest of the order, but they were stuck with 1,000 rifles, and they didn't know what to do with them. Eventually, they modernized, and then unfortunately, they decided to use the Ross rifle at the beginning of the First World War, which proved to be a disaster, and they ended up getting the British weapons anyway. But so that rifle that I showed you the picture of is one of the 1,000 or 700, I guess, that was sent to Canada. The Canadian government eventually sold them off, I think, at auction or to other people, or whether auction or just privately. I'm not sure how they did it. that this one ended up somewhere in Lambton County, I believe, because I bought it from an antique firearms salesman, collector sale who could sell them, and he was from Sarnia, so I think he got it in Lambton County out of an estate sale. So it found its way to Lambton County and then eventually to me. So it has some relevance in Canadian history only because it shows the government hadn't changed its ideas about trying to get away cheap, especially for the military. They bought the British subs. And now, of course, if you've heard recently, the government's in a quandary to what to do about our aging and pretty much obsolete fighter jets. So they decided that they would buy some used fighter jets, a little more modern, but used fighters, same fighter jet from Australia of all places. Even the Australians are ahead of us in this. So it shows you how things seem to change, but they stay the same. The government's still trying to get away cheap. And so I hope that story didn't bore you too much, but that's how I ended up getting this antique firearm. It does have a history behind it, not a funny history in the sense that the Canadian government was trying to get away cheap and then didn't get away cheap at all. So that's my little story anyway.
I have a couple things. The first one is, did anybody recognize this? It's an old rotary. Sorry. It's an old rotary phone, and this one is about 50 years old. I can plug it in and it still works. I can still use it. But you know, I think my nieces and nephews might recognize it, but my great nieces and nephews, they wouldn't have a clue what this is. You know, they're used to the little, you know, the little phone like this, or iPads and whatever, you know, you know, so, or the iPhone. So I just thought I'd bring this, and it's an old Strathroy phone. Okay, item number one. Okay, like item number two. Can everybody see this? This is a picture of the house that I was raised in. Okay, this is first I was going to tell Chad I've got the information all written down, so I'll send it to you so you don't like have to write it down in the minutes. This is what they call with a Carter and Isaac. A Carter and Isaac photograph. William Webster Carter, born in 1869, he died in 1935, and Isaac was Alberta Isaac, born in 1880 and died in 1961. They were a husband and wife, a team of photographers. They were actually both photographers at the time that, you know, that they married in it was in Brantford, Ontario, and they were known as the outdoor photographers. What they used to do is William Carter would actually go out into the countryside with his camera and his glass negatives, and when he would take pictures of farmhouses, and usually in the front of the house he would have the owners of the house standing there, or in the case of this picture, if you see, there's a fellow there with a couple of horses. Okay. You know, so if you see a picture such as this, it's probably it's a Carter and Isaac pictures. The majority of them had a little sticker on the back in the corner, and every picture was actually numbered. In the case of this picture here, it's number 3667, and this other picture is actually 3689, and you know, so it's about 20 pictures later from the original one. Now it was about 26, 27 years that I started to ask the question, I wonder who was born in the same house that I was raised in. and in doing so, I managed to track down, who the previous owners was, and that's how I, how I came across this picture. Like the three women in front are the three youngest of 11 children. Okay. The entire family, this is the William Martin family, they had 11 children. Okay. And when the family lived in that old house from around about the 1870s, 1880s time frame until 1937. Okay. And then and then for about 10 years, it was owned by the Hendra family. And then in 1950, that's when my father I actually purchased this farm. You see, so yeah, this is the old house that I was raised in. And yeah, and this is on lot, it's on lot 14, on the third concession, South Yagermont Road in Adelaide Township. So this is now called Montferry Drive. And and this house is only a mile up the road, and it's on lot number 10. And the fellow who's standing there is actually Archie Markslow. When Archie Markslow got married to the girl here on the right hand side, her name is Ethel Martin, and a few of them would know. Actually, Mary and George, the late Mary and George was a daughter of this couple. So this is the Carter and Isaac pictures. I was just going to say they were married in 1902, and they went to live in St. Mary's, and they practiced in St. Mary's from 1902 to 1907, and from 1911 to 1914. Then they were in Galt from 1917 to 1911. They were I moved to Brantford from 1914 to 1916, and they went to Elora from 1916 to 1923. They were in Hamilton from 1924 to 1928, and then they retired and they worked in Brantford, Ontario. And so even though they were living in these various places, they actually traveled to the various places in Ontario. Like I've seen these pictures in the various township history books. There's a number in the Adelaide Township history book. There's a number in the Warwick Township in that history book. I was able to determine that these pictures were taken in the spring of 1911. The way I figured that out is that I was helping one of my neighbors do a history of their house, and I knew that at one time it belonged to the Down family, to Bert and Bertha Down, and their first child, her name was Blanche, and Blanche got married. Blanche is the mother of our former fire chiefs, Bill Gibson and Tom Gibson. By contacting them, I managed to get a copy of the Carter and Isaac picture of their house, and like in Blanche, Blanche's mother is actually holding her. Blanche was a newborn baby, and I found out that she was born in December of 1910. So looking at that picture, I can determine that the picture was taken in the spring of 1911. And so these pictures were either a mile west and a mile east of the Down farm, and that's the story with these pictures. Carter and Isaac picture. They are it's a result of a lot of research to track down families and track down pictures and whatever. So the question I have is what happened to the, to the 20 pictures that were taken between this picture and that picture. I would love to get a hold of them because they would all be pictures that were taken in the same area as where I grew up.
Can share with the group. I have a Victorian photo album, and this photo album was purchased by my grandmother at a yard sale, or an antique yard sale in Watford, where my grandpa grew up. And this thing is so ratty and so old. Like, this used to be velvet, still is velvet, but it's very weathered, and a lot of the fabric is coming out. You can see here, fabric's coming apart. It's so worn that even the crest, the crest on the front has been worn down, and it used to have a buckle or a belt to keep it shut, and it also has pegs, probably to protect it from the table when you put it down. But inside are a bunch of, that's the front cover. I'm going to try my best to hold it up because it is so delicate that the slightest thing will break it. Okay. A lot of beautiful family photographs. Only a couple of them have been able to come out. So some photographers include T.B. Taylor, who was prevalent in Watford. There's even a couple in Strathroy by William Downes, and I think somebody named Hayes. The signature on the back suggests it was Hayes. I wonder, and there's a couple from Petrolia as well, somebody from Detroit, and there's even one of those cards that you get from a funeral. I don't know if that's possible to read or not. I can try and get a little bit closer. It's really fascinating. It's something else. So I haven't been able to do a lot of research about the photographs and the people that are in this album, but there's a lot of photos that suggest it was late Victorian or pre-20th century, based on the bell skirts, bell-shaped skirts. And I don't know if there are any post-mortem photographs in here, even though there are some photographs with very young children in it. But I haven't been able to do any research yet. I hope to once the right room is available again, and maybe if I can get into the museum, maybe I might be able to get some help from Crystal. But that's basically what I have. There's also a couple of carte de visite of John A. Macdonald. So I know we're in the ballpark of turn of the 20th century. I know we're in that ballpark. So that's just a few of the pages from inside the book. But anyway, it's a little treasure I have, and yeah, I hope to do some research on it soon.
Like I was just going to mention, why the similar album to yours? Okay, this is a 1900. The pictures aren't in it now, but it did have a lot of pictures, and there are names on the bottom of some of the pictures. There's a funeral card, okay, from 1891. Okay.
Wow.
And this was this is the Eastman family photo album, and it was that was the second house, the second farm that my father purchased was the Eastman farm. And of course I got to know the Eastman family, and yeah, this was an old album from the Eastman family. And a number of these pictures I've given, I figured out who the relatives were, and I've given them away to relatives, to the great-grand, and in some cases, grandchildren, in some cases, the great-great-grandchildren of the Eastman family. So it was fascinating research.
They're sterling silver. They're like that big. I've had them away in a box for many years. They weren't mine, they were Vaughn's parents. Anyway, they tie into an earlier story that Bill had with the phones. This is what they used. This was a special gift. You could use this to dial your rotary phone. That's what they were for. You can imagine people gave those as gifts because it's silver and it's even engraved. I think it looks like 1940 to 1968 on it. And then on the back, it has my father-in-law's name, I think. Hard to tell. I think so. Yeah, it's got my Alec and Jimmy. That was Vaughn's dad and mother. So yeah, that's what these are. You can imagine you had to have something like this to dial a phone with. You couldn't use your finger, I guess. It was a special gift, I guess.
I have a picture here. Can everybody see that, I hope? It's the South Middlesex. I'll bring it up as close as I can. My dad's in the front there.
It's too close.
Too close?
Too close.
Go back a bit. How's that?
Yeah.
Okay, it's a picture of the Komoka. Oh, okay, it's a picture of the Komoka hockey team from the South Middlesex Hockey League, which ran in the 40s, 50s, and I think into the 60s in the area. There were teams. I know my dad played for Komoka. There was I think, a team in Glencoe. There was a team in Westmount, which was not part of London then. I mean, London didn't even. It was there, and I think there was maybe a team in Glanworth, but I can't get any information on them. You go to Google, and they don't exist on Google. There is nothing about the South Middlesex Hockey League on Google anywhere. So if there's somebody out there now, some of the names, the other names were Les Carmichael. I think it's Don McLaughlin, Harold Bailey, Norm Graham, Pete and Joe Prohaska, Bob Tuckey, Peter Van Belois, and I think a fellow named Glover were in that picture. So if anybody knows anything about that that hockey team or the league itself, I would really like to get some information on it and find out just exactly how it ran. I mean, it did run for quite a number of years. It was in the, as I say, it was the South Middlesex Hockey League. It ran into the 60s, I think, at some point in time. But somebody must have some records on it because they obviously had a schedule. They had teams made up. My dad, I've got a plaque from not a plaque, but from his jacket that says they were the champions in, I think, 47, 48, and so on for the Komoka team. But most of these guys, I think, were from Strathroy, Caradoc area. I don't know why they selected Komoka as their sweater, but that's what it is. So anybody know any information about that? I guess not.
Seeing a lot of shaking heads.
Ronald Doan put up his hand.
Yes, please.
My dad and I used to go to those the hockey games that were held in the old Ontario Arena at Western Fairground, and there was yes, Komoka, Glencoe. I'm not sure whether Mount Bridges, Sharon, Glendale, Byron, Westmount, and we were there the night that I think it's Bill McDonald, the Ford dealer there. He was in Glencoe at that time when he was struck in the face and lost his eye. So that's, I don't have any schedules or anything like that, but I know that my dad and I attended a lot of games there. It would have been in the 50s. I don't have a date that I can specifically say, but we went, I think it was Monday nights, and
Yeah, I think you're right.
we were nearly every Monday night we were there.
Yeah. Now, some of the games I think were played also elsewhere, but on natural ice rinks. I think you just opened the doors of the rink and the ice was frozen. But I mean, it wasn't the artificial ice, no pipes running under the floor or anything, I think, because in the picture I have here, Joe Prohaska's wearing a hat. And I think that was to stay warm when you were playing they weren't necessarily outdoor rinks. They were covered, but they were natural ice, I think. And this would be late 40s, early 50s. I think maybe they graduated to, like you say, the old Ontario Arena at the fairgrounds there to play. Because I remember seeing some game. My dad and I went. This was after he was no longer playing, but he had some of his friends were still playing, so we went to see the game. But so if anybody else has any info on it, it'd be really appreciate to find out as much as I can about it. So anyway, that was just a request that I had for the group.
Well, and Waldy Allen from Sharon was the goaltender for Glendale. As the goaltender for Sharon, he worked for, there was a farmer who also delivered blocks of ice, and he worked for him delivering the ice. And so he was the goalie there. So Waldy was the goalie for Glendale.
Now, maybe you have some information. My dad told me that there was some fellow they played against who used to wear a shirt and tie under his hockey sweater.
I don't remember.
Now, of course, I have no way of verifying that anymore, but he was some big fellow, I don't know whether he was a farmer or what he did, but he used to wear his shirt and tie, and then he'd put his hockey sweater over his shirt and tie. So only in the rural hockey leagues can you get that sort of thing, I guess.
And you can't make it up.
And you can't make it up.
It's strange that Google wouldn't have any information at all on that, what you're looking for, Brian.
No, unless I have to type in something else like Middlesex Hockey League, modern stuff, the hockey leagues, the local kids leagues and whatnot. And I didn't put in a date for 1947, 48. That doesn't help me. I get the same stuff coming up, so I can't seem to find anything on it at all. That maybe I have to type in something different, but there's got to be some record somewhere. I mean, somebody had to keep these records. They had to keep the files, on the standings, the statistics, the playoffs, all that kind of stuff. So I don't know where they disappeared to. Somebody's got them somewhere in the basement, I guess.
Maybe you could try the McDonald's. Are they still in Glencoe?
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I know my neighbor played, I think, for the Glencoe team, Lloyd Kettlewell.
Okay.
He played for but I don't think he remembers a whole lot about it, the fact that he just played for the Glencoe team.
Mm-hmm.
And that would be back in the 40s and the 50s that he played, because Lloyd's, well, he's almost 90 now, so it was in the 50s that he played. He was a pretty good hockey player, I guess, but that's about all he could tell me too, as well. Yeah, he remembers some of the guys he played against, but as far as giving me any hint as to who I could contact. He didn't. I don't think he. Well, maybe I can talk to him again. He might know about that. But yeah, it's kind of an interesting story. I'd like to find out more about it. And maybe if I get enough info, I can do a presentation on it sometime at one of the meetings to just talk about, because it's very local and it's all local guys that played. I mean, I don't think any of them ever went to the NHL or anything, but it was I guess they had a lot of fun in the league anyway. So,
Brian, Doug Statham here. Got a little comment to make. You mentioned Lloyd Kettlewell.
Yes.
And I recall Lloyd had a very brief career with the Detroit Red Wings.
Yeah. I think they wanted him to play in Windsor Junior A, I think. But he turned it down. He didn't go. I think he had that possibility that he could have played in a Junior A for Windsor, but he turned it down. And then he never did. He never did play Junior A. He came home and I don't know, went to work, got married, I guess. I don't know. But exactly what he did. But I did remember that he turned it down. But I think that was probably Detroit probably had the farm team in Windsor, their Junior A team, and that's where they wanted him to go, I guess, when he was, 18, 19.
Thank you for watching this presentation from our February Show and Tell event for the Strathroy and District Historical Society. For more information about the Historical Society and what we do, please visit our Facebook page at facebook.com/Strathroy Historical Society, or visit our website at sdhsociety.weebly.com. Thank you.